Anyway, I am just delighted to see you all, and uh, welcome to my monthly branding clinic. I'm Sandra Koenig, for those of you who don't know me, and I have a business called Branding Harmony, where I do something that I created that I call brand coaching. And the way I got to that was, for years I worked at big agencies in the Bay Area doing graphic design and creative direction, but primarily focused on branding really large companies. And then about 5 years ago, I went through my own sort of midlife crisis, or whatever you want to call it, and I became a coach. And then after I became a coach, I started to have some insight into how I could bring together my two worlds, the two different things that I loved. And that's where this brand coaching was born. And a lot of you on the call today have worked with me in some regard or another. And I'm just delighted to have you all here.
Hey, Sandra, it's Rob.
Oh, there's Rob. Oh, and Janelle. I can't see you, Janelle. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to connect on my iPad because my laptop has got the thing shut down. So I get that email set up. You'll see me.
I can't hear you very well either. But I'm grateful you emailed me your questions.
You're welcome.
So today, I thought it would be fun to just go back to talking about what is branding. I'm going to mute all you guys because there's some background noise. And then I'll open up the mic when we start having more of a conversation. So I wanted to go back to the basics today, just talk about what is branding. Hi, Molly. And why it's important for entrepreneurs, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and startups, and then some nonprofits and smaller businesses. And the way I think of branding is it's that vision behind everything you do. It's kind of it's the fundamental building block of your business. It's the core message that you want to communicate in your business to the world. And what makes my business a little different and the way I work with people is to kind of uncover what I would call the true self, and how that intersects with what you have on offer, and how you can talk about those things, that intersection, to create your vision and your message. And then to really start to discern, there's Janelle, and then to start to discern, what's the best. I'm going to try to mute. There's a bunch of noise. Anyway, then to start to understand, there's an intersection between understanding who you're marketing to, what that core message is, and then what's the best look and feel, and then how do you consistently, I think great branding, I can say this more clearly. In great branding, there's a consistency to the message that you're putting forth. And that message crosses all media. Like, for years when I was working in the design world, I would be often leading a team that was creating the identity for your company, and then we would take that identity and apply it consistently across all media. Like you want every place that your consumer sees you to have a similar look and feel, to have the same message, and to have that message be compelling. I personally believe if you touch people's hearts in what you're doing, and I think a lot of you already know this, you have more impact. Like, there's a way, if you really touch people with what you're doing and what you're about, it changes the conversation. And one of the interesting ways that brands have evolved is that these days there's a huge emphasis on more transparency. Like, companies can't get away with what they used to get away with. Like, I was often hired to rebrand enormous companies because they had just done something horrible. It's part of the reason I left that work. I started feeling less Like I couldn't, no matter how much money they paid me, I would feel sick when I did some of the work for some of these companies. Um, they can't like greenwash things anymore. There's too much involvement by consumers. There's so much power in social media that there is a bigger calling for all sorts of companies to have greater transparency. Um, so I do think that's an important aspect of branding. And I think a lot of coaches inherently get that. Like it's part of, you're going to be, a lot of you are practitioners of one sort or another. That level of transparency or just integrity and honesty comes through in your messaging, which is part of the brand. Does that make sense? You guys can just nod. And why I think it's important to think about your brand as an entrepreneur. Well, one of the mistakes I see people make is to not be clear about what they're offering. And it doesn't even have to be specific. It's not like if you're a coach, you have to have a niche. It's just to know what's on offer. Like, what do you uniquely bring to what you're offering the world? Like having clarity around that and being able to talk about it makes it more powerful. Like for me, there's something around all the years I worked in branding, I realized, especially once I learned the 3 principles, many of you are in the 3 principles community, that I had been witnessing something in very large companies that I didn't quite have the words for, but it was that whoever is at the top creates the whole company culture. The whole brand comes from the top down. That vision comes from that person, whoever the leader is. Doesn't matter how big or small your company is. And when I worked with companies because I would have a lot of interaction with the executive teams, when what that company was about was really in alignment with who that person was at a deep level, like it matched their values and their level of integrity. There was a different force that was present. I felt like they were aligned with something much larger, and it gave them a lot of clarity in what they were up to in their big businesses. Like if they had a clear vision, they could hire people that also believed in that same vision. Like you can imagine how powerful it would be to have employees that have the same vision, how powerful that could be. Like this core vision that I think is the heart of branding can impact all different aspects of the business, like who to hire, what your message is, who you put your message out to, like who is your audience, how you dress. Like I like to use, some of you have done my groups, I like to use Apple as an example. Like Steve Jobs took his branding to the level of dressing. Like he always wore a black shirt, long sleeves, and jeans, and he dressed very much like the people who were developing for the Apple platform. Like he always, I always loved, I know he's a controversial figure, but I always loved that it felt like when I would see him speak publicly, he wasn't trying, he dressed like his people. And I loved that about him. Like, and he appealed, like, especially in the early days of Apple, their focus was on creative fields. And for somebody like me, he dressed like me and the other people I work with, very casually, very simply. And I think he put a lot of thought into all those different aspects. I'm not saying everybody should dress their brand, but it's like you can take it that far. So I'm going to unmute you guys. Does anybody have questions about what I've just said? Any comments?
One of the things that's coming up for me, Sandra, is that I'm not clear exactly on what I am going to be doing. So there may be a bit of coaching, there may be a bit of project management work, there may be a bit of training. So there's a whole kind of variety of things that I may be doing depending on what comes up. So if you have a plan that's not that clear yet, how do you start out with, or what do you start out with?
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody again. If you guys have headsets, if you could put them on, it tends to cut down on the background noise. I see a lot of you do have them on. Well, the way I think about branding, and Janelle, I'm going to address your questions. Janelle sent me some great questions for the call today. I think of branding as a very living entity. Like as you create a business, it's not set in stone. Now she's gone. um, come back, Janelle. I'm answering your question. Anyway, I was saying that. Can you hear me, Janelle? Because I wanted to make sure you heard this. I think of brands as living entities. Like there's a way, your brand, like the vision for your brand is an expression of this point in time. And as you grow and change, that can also evolve. Like one of the things, Molly, I hope you don't mind if I call you out a little bit on this, but I'm gonna need you. Molly sent an email out this morning talking about how she had changed the letter of her newsletter. Is that what you would call it, Molly?
Yeah, e-zine or newsletter.
And to me, that was like a beautiful expression of how a brand evolves. Like you had some insights, and I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that. And you realized you wanted to change the focus of your newsletter.
Sure, and it's evolved over a period of about 3 years, and I didn't rush into changing it. My newsletter used to be called Authentic Promotion, and it was that for 15 years or so. And as my work's changed in the last 3 years, that didn't really capture it, but I left it alone until it became clear to me what would be truer. And then I just changed it and made a simple announcement. I've seen people do much more elaborate things when they're doing rebranding, and over time I might choose to, but it just became more congruent with what I'm doing. And in a way, it was when your brand is congruent with what you're doing, those choices become pretty straightforward in a way.
Yeah. Anyway, I love that I got that today.
That's great.
and anyway, so I think of brands as like there's no reason for it to be set in stone. As your work evolves, so would your core message. And it's one of the reasons I suggest that people revisit their websites every couple of years. Like, is it accurately representing what you do now? And it can be, sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes it's more, there's more to it. Does that answer your question, Janelle?
Yeah, it sure does. It gives me a little bit more freedom.
I'm good. I know I would like to have you guys all unmuted, but I think there's too much noise. So just wave or something if you have something to say. So I'm going to go ahead and address some of Janelle's questions. And if stuff comes up, if you want to ask anything, let me know. So one of Janelle's questions was, what are the biggest or most common mistakes people make with their brands or their websites? And I think that's a great question. And I did a bunch of writing in response to Janelle's questions because I realized, there's a whole bunch I could say about this stuff. But the biggest mistakes I saw or what I see is people not looking professional enough. I put that at the top of the list. That they're going after, let's say in the coaching community, there's a lot of people that want to do executive coaching because there's a fair amount of money there. But they don't brand themselves to look at least as professional as who their clientele are. Like you want to look like you belong in that same realm. And that might mean investing in, hiring somebody to do a professional website for you if you're not capable of doing that yourself. Like you want to look very elevated and current. You want to know, like I also see that people often don't know who they're actually marketing to. They haven't actually just done some basic research of who are the people they want to have a conversation with, whatever that brand is. Like who do you really want to appeal to give some thought to that? And that can change, and that changes over time too. It can broaden. It can be, Like, I don't have any rules about like you should have a little narrow niche or anything. It's just they have an idea. Like, I have ideas about who I want to work with, and yet I also work with whoever comes. I trust that people are drawn to work with me. There's some divine order around that. I mean, the other thing is people not having. I can't tell you how many websites I look at and they're full of typos, or they have way too much copy. Like, the average viewer will not read very much. All of you who've worked with me know I kind of drill in about this. Like, the reason Twitter's so popular is it's very short blurbs. Like, people, years ago, I did a lot of work for museums, and there were all these studies about how much people would read as they're walking through an exhibit in a museum, and it was something like 100 words. So if you didn't say what was important in the first 100 words, most people were not going to see it. And I think it's similar today on the web that, you know, some people, like many of you have worked with Michael Neal, he tends to write a lot. And for years, I didn't read his emails, and I've studied Michael Neal. It just felt like they were too long. I could get so much email. Like, did I really want to spend 10 minutes reading an email? No, not really. And so unless you're kind of famous like him, I think it's great to stay with being succinct. Like, I think Steve Chandler's a great example of that. Those of you who know him, he sends out short, insightful emails. They have a lot of impact. For me, like, I will always read his because it's not a big time investment. And your website can be the same way. And also, I don't think, for you guys who are in the 3 principles, like we talk a lot about the feeling behind things, and to consider the impact of your words. What's the feeling behind it? Like, that's a different level of transparency. Like, when your message, people feel where you're coming from, even if it's written word. I think my internet connection's a little bad today. Anyway, they feel that. They feel you through your words. To consider, what is the feeling you want people to have when they're reading or looking at, like when you're choosing images, what's the feeling you want to convey? Just to consider it. Those are things that I often find are overlooked. Like, people may have great copy and then just like really kind of awful images. Or vice versa. So, any questions at this point? You guys don't mind me just talking?
Yeah, keep talking.
I'll just keep talking. Okay, I'm muting. This is my preference to be more interactive. All right, I'm gonna mute the people on the phones. They're having other conversations. So, let's see. And then another one of Janelle's questions was, what companies break the rules of branding but somehow make it work? I don't have a great example of that. Like, I think that I have seen companies try to do that, and then I've been hired to go. This is years ago. I would get hired to go in and clean up the mess they made.
Okay.
Like, one big brand I worked on probably 10 years ago was Anheuser-Busch. I remember when they gave me all their branding materials, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, they own so many different companies, and the branding was just like all over the place. And I had to present. Anyway, it was like a year-long project of cleaning up the branding for all their companies so that it was consistent. Like, it gets complex when you get into bigger companies. There's all these sub-brands, and some of them have slightly different personalities. I wish I knew I could point something out. Like, there's
I was just hoping there was hope for me.
Well, and not having a clear brand doesn't mean you're not going to succeed. It's just that if you do have a clear brand, it can help. It can support what you're up to.
It's just like I keep on waiting to hear those stories about people who suddenly become really famous when they're in their 60s, because that's something I can, still.
Well, with social media these days, you can just kind of decide you're famous, and
Oh, very good point. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's in the over 65 range. Or 70.
oh my God. I'm sure there's people out there.
I'm sure.
I don't I don't have any great examples, but it's a great question. I will, if I find something, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Oh, and then one of your questions, so is branding mostly about design, the logo, website, visual materials, space, or is it something more about how you show up, what headspace you're in, the culture, behavior? And I think it's all of those things. And I was trying to talk about a little bit at the beginning of the call that for me, there's this core vision that any brand has. Like if you, like you can brand all different sorts of things, like a product, a service, company. It's becoming very popular to have personal branding, like for executives and people, they have personal brands. So it doesn't, like whatever you're branding, it's just like the vision behind that informs everything. And traditionally people considered the logo sort of the heart of the brand, but it's just an expression of it. And it's definitely important. It's not everything. Or with the website, it's sort of like you want, I'll use myself as an example. I have my branding harmony, the homepage. I've got this photo of this light bulb with some little rays drawn on it. And I use that same image and the same logo on Facebook, on Twitter. It's like consistently used everywhere. But it's not the most important thing. It's just a visual identifier so people know they're in the right place. Like it's the same, it's still me in conversation with them. Let's see. Whoever's typing, if you could mute yourself, that'd be great. I can hear it. And then I love this question. You asked, how does the concept of branding work in consideration of the three principles? We make up so much stuff about who we are, what we're selling, why we need to sell it, success, desire to be liked, needed.
Cannot be completed.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody again. Such interesting noise. Anyway, I love this question, Janelle, and I think it's a hard one to answer because there's a few of you on the call that aren't involved in the three principles, but there's this idea of how can I even summarize this? Well, the principles are mind, thought, and consciousness, and mind is the God principle or this energy that unites us all, that is bigger than any of us. And to me, that's the core principle of the three principles, like our relationship to that. And when you're branding, it's this funny line to cross into the world of form. And I think the way I see it now, and I'm sure I will continue to see more and more about this, is I think that everybody has some unique expression in this lifetime. And that can be aligned with your work. And to me, that can become the core of your brand. It's the intersection of that. And as who you understand yourself to be changes, your brand, of course, would change. but there's ways, there's certain gifts you have that you probably always had and you're going to have till you die that are uniquely you. And people in the principles don't talk about that much, or I'm not aware of it. But it's one of the things I like to focus on in the branding, like what is uniquely you? And part of the conversation for me is when I'm working with people is to really start to discern with them, like anything, are you branding? Are you creating your message from a higher state of consciousness? Like what level of consciousness are you in when you're deciding what you're going to put out there? Like if I was in a low state, I'd probably be saying like, this one doesn't know shit about branding. Like you don't want to work with her. But from a different state, I have the clarity of knowing like I have a lot of experience with this. I think I have valid voice in this conversation kind of thing. It's a different place to come from. And if your branding can come, if your vision and your communications can come from that place of clarity, that is a different level of impact too. Like if you're not, because it can go both ways. Like there are also people, like I know some very successful branding people who just tell you like they are the best brander. They're the best. Like, and I also think that comes from a lower state of consciousness. Anytime there's aggrandizing. So, yeah, I think that's it. So I'm going to unmute you guys again because I've kind of got through those kind of quick, all of Janelle's questions. I tend to believe in the simplicity of things too. Like there's probably more I could say. Like, is there anything?
Sandra, what's the difference between branding and authenticity, or is there a difference?
Well, I think of authenticity more as a quality that can be embodied. And it can be a very powerful part of any brand vision. They're not the same. I think it could be an aspect of branding. Like I strive to be authentic in how I present myself. And I encourage my clients to be the same. And often that can feel quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like the day I launched my website, and I've talked about this a lot, because I created this work we do. I had some insights around the intersection between coaching and branding, and I created this process. And the day I launched my website, I cried all day. I was kind of a wreck.
Oh.
And I was in Supercoach Academy. Several people on the call were in Supercoach Academy, and I posted it to the Facebook group and just said, I'd love some feedback, but only nice feedback. So I was just feeling like so raw. I'm like, can I really do this? Can I really tell the world that this is on, even though I've been doing the work for years, like, can I really be this public about it? It just kind of tore me apart. And then I was fine. That first day was kind of awful. It was okay. And I think that's normal. Like if you're going to if you're putting out something powerful, to have some doubts about it seems natural.
Yeah.
Sandra, this is Rob. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Rob, sure.
One of the things that seems really clear to me is looking at what's your intention. I don't remember if you use that word anywhere, but you know, for a lot of people, there's an intention to make a living here, to make money at it, and that's certainly a valid intention. What I've found for me is that I don't have that intention. That's not my expectation that brings a reward to me in terms of making money. I have a great day job. I make plenty of money. I'm concerned about that. But I'm just concerned, or not even concerned, what I like. I just like what I'm doing. I like reaching out to people. I like telling people about what's going on. I mean, you get my email. I send an email out once a week to people. It's pretty, it's pretty amateurish, and yet I get a lot of feedback from people that they really like it, and don't stop, keep sending it. And then I helped set up the training program recently for volunteers, and it's just going incredible. So I think part of it is, what I see for myself is just, what am I trying to get, and what do I have an attachment to as a result? And that just seems kind of important in so many things, is the passion about what we're doing. I don't know, just some thoughts.
No, I like what you're pointing at a lot. I mean, what you do is different, like, because you're not trying to make a living through the three principles, but you are building. Rob also lives in the Bay Area. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he does a lot to build community here locally. In fact, has gotten me to host a monthly meeting at my house.
Kicking and screaming, but she does it anyway.
I'm not kicking and screaming.
I know, kicking and screaming for joy.
It was a nice thing that unfolded. But so you do a lot for the community, but it's like there's an aspect of service to what you're doing, but it's not about making money. But at some point it might be, you never know.
Yeah.
And I think it's different because you're not presenting yourself as a business. It doesn't necessarily have to be branded. Like, you really are about getting people together.
Yeah.
But if you decided to form an institute, I'd suggest branding it, at least somewhat.
Yeah.
But I do think it's good to be clear, what your intention is. Like, what are you up to, and to not pretend like it's something other than that. Just more authenticity and transparency. I do a combination of consulting and coaching. And I think the most powerful part of my work is the coaching, because it turns, my hope is through the work with people to have them start to really engage in creating their own brand. I can come in as a consultant and say a lot of things about just stuff I know about branding and what works and what doesn't work and what I observe in the market. But there's something much more powerful when the question is turned inward and it's created from the inside. But I do feel like I wear both hats, and I try to be very honest about that.
How much do you think those labels are helpful or a hindrance, Sandra? So I've been resting from my coaching business for a few months, and I'm just coming back to it. I've still been coaching. I've just been looking around, coming back to it, thinking about what do I do? I call it coaching because I feel like I've got to call it something.
Yeah.
And I also don't like it. I've been looking around, as I'm still trying to put my website together, but thinking about getting on with that now. been looking around at other people's websites, and there's a sense of there being a right way to do a website. Even as a 3P type of person, there's a right way of doing it. Like, they're kind of all the same. They've like the 3P ones have all got the nice sort of mushy, airy fairy words and the feeling and everything, and then the high performance ones are all that power, make you move, and that amazing goal, and they've all got these package structures which are very similar. Like, it's just all very samey. I've just been looking at it and like, this is all really generic.
Yeah,
and what a shame.
It's not Mary Poppins like at all.
No, I'm still on the Mary thing. I was actually reading a bit yesterday. But that's a shame for everyone, isn't it? You know, but everyone's, I guess, you know, I have a sense like it's useful to call myself a coach, because if people are out there looking for a coach, then they're going to find me under coach. But what do I do, really? You know, that question, what's your intention? That, it really came to me in this last week. You know, what do I want to do? Oh, and what comes up for me is I want to make people smile. Like, and I know it's more than that, but essentially that's what comes up for me. I want to make people smile. And, you know, that it seems to me in my life thus far that often that happens through the medium of a great conversation with people, aka coaching. But it's kind of a bigger thing than that. And the coaching bit can almost be a little bit restrictive, and we can get stuck in looking at, well, this is the way, if I'm a coach, well, this is how coaches do things, and so I kind of need to make it like that, and I'll kind of put my own spin on it, but it's still going to look like that. And how amazing would it be if everyone really connected to their uniqueness?
Yeah.
And didn't need to put a label on it. And at the same time, I can see how helpful a label can be. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I think what you're pointing at is beautiful. Like, I know it's one of those, like, I completely understand what you're saying, and it would make what I'm doing completely irrelevant.
You know, is that true? I think it would make it more irrelevant.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I
think it makes it more relevant, Sandra.
Well, but there's a way, like, you know, part of having a brand is you have to sort of choose a label. And I also dislike the label of coach. For years, I thought about becoming a coach, and I didn't, because I kept meeting coaches I didn't like. They were selling so hard. It was just like, I don't want to be part of this group. Like, they're scary. They're like, they all seem desperate and needy and like, give me your money, you know? I ended up on a meditation retreat and meeting some really lovely people who are coaches and seeing that it could be different. That kind of got me over that hump. But I also think coaching doesn't, like, especially some of us who studied the 3 principles, it doesn't really adequately describe what we're doing.
Mm-mm.
And like what you're saying, Libby, about how you want people to smile, like, I can imagine, like, Libby did one of my branding groups, and there's a way I can imagine, like, the things I know about you and what's uniquely you, that goes with you everywhere. Like, when you're working as a doctor, that also comes through there. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. That's so you that you're going to have that impact. If that's your intention, you're going to have that impact. And that's just something that's nice to be aware of when you create your brand, because you can talk about that. Like, who wouldn't want to have conversations with somebody who wants them to understand their own beauty and uniqueness and leave the conversation smiling? That sounds great to me. You know, sign me up. I don't care what you call yourself. Any thoughts? Anybody else have thoughts about that? It's a great.
Yeah, I have the same feelings as Libby, really, and I agree with what she said. And I really hate labels, and I've got so many names I can call myself, but I don't want to call myself any of them because they're so restrictive, and it sort of sends you in one avenue or the other, and it doesn't describe what you do.
Yeah.
And I looked at different coaches who qualified with different trainers, and they all call themselves something different, like transformative coach or state of mind coach and all these different things. And I think, well, what's the difference there then? Why are they all calling themselves different things? But obviously, where they're trained, where they're, which arena they come from, really. But yeah, so maybe the Libby Hodges brand or Birdie Brown brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We got our own flavor.
Yeah. Well, and Libby, I hope you don't mind me talking a little bit about, like, one of the things that came up in the branding group with Libby was this connection to Mary Poppins and magic and like how, like, what a fun, like, you can feel the lightness in that. Just me saying it, like, it didn't come from me. It came from, like the feeling of that. It brings something unique to the conversation, and how beautiful that is. Because to me, it really, hope you don't mind me kind of out of you, but it really, it's how I experience you. Like, there's a truth and honesty in that. That's beautiful. Not that you're going to dress up like Mary Poppins, but you could, you could take it that far if you wanted.
Little umbrella.
Yeah. And the box of tricks.
Float away.
I like the bag. It looked kind of like a medical bag, and all the things that came out of it. The lamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was out at a gallery night a couple of nights ago, and somebody I've known for a long time, I was telling her just this much about what I do. And she said, well, who do you work with? And I said, well, I work with lots of different people on different things. She just looked at me like I didn't have anybody to work with, like I wasn't specific enough. I think it's like I need to identify some group, aging women, which could be from 12 up or something. Women 12 to 94.
Pretty much from the time you're born, you're aging.
Huh?
Pretty much from the time you're born, you're aging. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. She looked at me like I had two heads. I didn't know what I was doing, and at the time I probably might not have, because I was just out having a good time and not thinking about anything. It's funny.
But the truth is, like, especially for people who are practitioners, you don't have to limit who you work with.
Well, no. And historically, like, people and the principals have worked with all sorts of people and businesses and a mix of that, everything in between, because you can.
Yeah. Well, like, my friend Steve is on the call. He's a chiropractor. He's being quiet. And I can't imagine, like, as a chiropractor, you say, I only work with, like, 12-year-old boys or something. Like, why would you limit yourself? You could. People do, but you don't need to.
I think that's where what you're doing is so useful, Sandra, because maybe this was the way you did branding before you discovered the principles. But for a lot of us, we've been hoodwinked into there being a way to do branding. And it's very easy to get sucked back into that. Like, when you talk about the Mary Poppins thing, I can hear the chatter in my head about, yeah, it's really me, and boy, am I going to look like a big flake. And
well, you don't have to say Mary Poppins ever, but it's the feeling of Mary Poppins.
It is the feeling of Mary Poppins, but there's that has been an anxiety of mine, that if I am too much myself, I will look too wacky for people.
And can you imagine, like, let's just go to the extreme. Let's say you put yourself out there in this totally wacky way. You dressed up as Mary Poppins. Like, who do you think is going to be drawn work with you?
People you want to work with.
I think it'd be fascinating. I bet you get some really interesting people coming to work with you. Like, at that extreme.
You see, I think you just have to trust that if you're... It's not really about who you are when you're really being you. I think it's about the fact that you're really being you.
Yeah.
that resonates with people. Like, you know, we had this conversation about how I have this lofty dream, which I'm nowhere near achieving, of working with people in government. You know, and then I remember thinking about this Mary Poppins things, and well, you know, that made me a complete flake, and nobody would do that. Actually, when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, his wife had the wackiest, flakiest life coach on board, and she had access to all the top people. And I'm not at all like her; I think she was crazy. But you know, you would have said, no way would she be in number 10. She was practically living there at one stage. So.
And like, you can imagine how, like, business, like the idea of what you would bring, because I also think besides this lightness, you have incredible clarity and groundedness and all this experience working with people as a doctor. Like like all that life experience comes with you into the conversation, including the lightness. But it doesn't mean you can't drop in for a more serious conversation.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But there's something about not getting sucked into that standard pattern about how we do business. Like, you know, this thing of the elevator pitch, you know, what do you do? Like Caesar was just saying, you know, what do you do? Well, I have got asked over the last few months as I've been resting, people ask me all the time, you know, what is it that you do? And I have no elevator pitch. I never know what I'm going to say. And the number of times people have said to me, well, I hope you've recorded that and or written, or you need to write it down now, because that's what you should say every time. And, and it's different every time. It's in the moment every time, but it seems to work. But, you know, standard business marketeers, branders, whatever, would say you've got to have it down and consistent in the form of words. And I guess what it is consistent in the feeling, isn't it?
That's the way I see it. That's the way I see it, totally. That it's not, I don't have something I say. It's kind of like I know what I do, and sometimes I say things and I think that didn't even make sense, and people will still want to work with me because I think the feeling behind it, like I have a lot of passion about what I do. They connect to that.
Yeah.
But it also depends who you're speaking to as well, doesn't it, really? Because different people, you would say differently to different people. So depending what they're doing and what they're up to.
Yeah, and I tend to have more of a conversation with people. It's not like, this is what I do in 25 words. Zip, you know, that's it. That's a great conversation.
I had a funny one tonight. I had a new client ring me up, and I knew of her. I knew someone's referring me as a new client, but I didn't know anymore. I didn't ask anymore because I didn't really want to know what to be in the moment. And she rang me, and she was chattering away, and I didn't say anything. I just said hello, you know, that was me. And she carried on talking, and all of a sudden she said, "Oh, I love how you're so cautious. I know I've got to work with you, and I need 3 appointments now." And she decided on that I was going to be a coach. And she was traveling 120 miles on the train to come and see me and back again.
Oh, wow. Do you see people in person?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So I was quite surprised because I didn't say anything. She said, "Oh, I love how you're so cautious." In other words, they didn't sort of jump in and say, "Oh, yes, new client."
Yeah.
So just that and listen. Yeah. That's quite gobsmacked. Still sort of thrown by that.
Yeah.
Thinking I should have said a lot more and done a lot more, but no, she was really happy. So.
I mean, this isn't really part of the branding conversation, but I like what you're pointing to, because I do think there's a way, any of us who work one-on-one with people, when a new client comes, we're also checking them out. Like, you know, they're checking us out, and you want it to be a good fit. I mean, I just turned down an enormous opportunity to do a big project with a nonprofit. So it just felt out of alignment with my own integrity. It was interesting to realize, like, this isn't a good fit for me.
Yeah.
On paper, it looks like a great opportunity. But that's important to me. I want to, because I think I spent the last years of my design career living a little bit outside of my own integrity, like realizing I didn't really want to support some of the companies I was doing work for. Not Anheuser-Busch. I'm all for beer. But I have German heritage. It sort of like runs in my blood. So we have about 10 minutes left. Are there any questions? Anybody? Comments?
I don't have any questions, but it's just been a really useful conversation to listen to. And I think it's funny because the whole conversation about what we think we should be saying, and Libby's comment of it's, in the feeling rather than in the words, just really, really resonated. So yeah, I just wanted to say that it's been a really lovely conversation to listen to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Stuart, you haven't said anything. Anything? Stuart's got a really crazy brand that's emerging.
Crazy brand.
Norman's running wild. Here they come. You want to tell the group what you're up to? It's really cool.
Branding wise, I don't really know where I am, but yeah, I think it's you just saying about in emerging. Yeah, it's just unfolding. So we're, as a family, we're selling everything we own and going off to travel the world. So I've created a website and the domain name Norman's Running Wild. And we'll see what happens.
I'm so excited for you.
It does feel like there isn't exactly an intention there, branding wise, but it feels like something, you go back to just being authentic, that something will come from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. To me, it feels very much like you, because Stuart, I did do some of the branding coaching with Stuart, and like the idea of adventure was so close to like your soul, like your soul's desire. Like,
yeah, so it's kind of come away from the actual coaching site that I had, and the adventure is now as a family adventure. So it'd be interesting to see what emerges from that. But I think as well that, like Libby was saying, that it's easy to kind of fall into the thing of thinking like other practitioners, it's got to be like this or it should be like that. And I fall into that myself. I tell clients about that all the time, that we live for these shoulds and needs to, and now I find myself doing it. I find myself going, it needs to look professional, it needs to look like this, or should look like that, and looking through other people's websites. And
that's another big mistake. I forgot to address that. Like,
don't look at other websites.
Well, just to like, a lot of people end up thinking like they emulate somebody, like decide to become a coach because they want to be the next Michael Neal, but they're never going to be the next Michael Neal. They're going to be you're going to be you. Anyway, thanks, Stuart. But I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's cool.
One of the things I was thinking about when Libby was talking, though, is that this canned approach that most coaches have. They do one-on-ones, they do group events, they do. I mean, I'm not sure I'm not going to do this either.
If you're a 3 principles practitioner, you offer intensives.
That's right. And
there's a thing you do. You collaborate. If you're really good, you have a partner.
Yeah.
You never work alone. I'm not a good example of any of this, but don't emulate me.
I'm just thinking about even how there are some, Chris Morris does these things, but he does them in a little shift of a way of, let's don't sign up for any, package deal, at least now. Until it makes people wait a little while and some stuff. So, but mostly it's those things. And I guess we all do those things, but it seems to me that it might be useful to be distinct, if you can be somewhat distinctive in how you talk about it. So that would seem to me to be really important, to be reflective of what you've. It would be totally, with a sign up on every page, for example, or whatever. It just wouldn't work. But I was just, that would
I mean, there. I think in any community like that anybody's part of, there can start to feel like there's a sameness. Like my original coach training was with Coaches Training Institute, and I can look at somebody's website and just say, oh yeah, they trained the same place I did. I recognize them.
Oh, yeah.
And the same for 3 Principles, or
Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin.
Yeah, the Prosperous Coaches.
Yeah, because I've worked
there's a whole different
both sides of that one.
Yeah, you get a different feeling. Or Martha Beck. I can tell who studied with Martha Beck. For some reason, I keep meeting all these coaches who are Martha Beck trainees. It's a whole there's a different, or Marie Forleo, has a big influence. There's real specific kind of personalities that come, there's a sameness. And my hope for people always is that there is a uniqueness in your particular voice. Like if you can find your authentic voice and use that in whatever you're offering, it can be a lot more powerful.
Yeah.
Because if people feel your authenticity, they can tell. I think we're all so much more transparent than we think. That, if I told you, I'm making $1 million a year, can you feel that I'm lying? I'm totally lying. That was a lie. As a coach, I'm I'm not $1 million coach. I'm not. But there are people who say these things, and on some gut level, we all know they're lying. That probably wasn't the best example, but it's what came to mind.
Well, are telling the truth, because somebody else told me they'd made $1 million last year, and I knew it was true.
Yeah, well, some people, it's different, but I'm using what was not true.
Yeah.
Just so you could have the feeling of you can tell that person's lying. We're just so much more transparent than we think.
Well, it shows. Yeah. Our grounding shows.
Or, I can remember for those of you not in the Principles, George Pransky is one of the kind of renowned teachers, and he was talking about people's grounding and understanding this philosophy, and how often with practitioners, they try to talk about it as if they have his level of grounding. And you can feel it. You can tell they're just way outside their own understanding. And it's the same with your branding. If you're talking about your business in a way that's not authentic, it's like if I told you I was doing brand coaching with Anheuser-Busch, I'm not. I used to do design work at that level, but as a brand coach, I'm not working at that level. Not yet. There's a way, I don't even know if that's a good example, but there's a way you can stay with what's true about your business and who you are that's authentic. If a big company like that approached me, I would be excited to talk to them. I kind of miss, because there's a tremendous amount of influence you can have when you're having conversations with companies of that size. I would be excited about that, but that hasn't happened yet. We'll see. So I'm not saying I'm doing it. At least I try to be authentic about, I have different kinds of experience doing the different things I've done. Is that making sense? Or I'm just rambling?
I gotta bye. Thank you.
I have to pop.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's the
Bye.
hour.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate you all being
Good
here.
to see all of you.
Everybody. Yeah, good to see you.
And thanks for the newcomers that joined us. Great.
See you tomorrow, Sandra.
Yeah, see you tomorrow, Rob.
Thank you, Sandra.
It's great to see you guys. And if you have more questions, email me.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Or we can have a conversation. Love to you all.
Bye.
Bye.